Have a boyfriend or a girlfriend not sure to buy your first property with them or without them? There are many reasons to do both. So let's get into it. My name's Manda Walker and I'm the mortgage coach, and I'm here because I believe everyone has a right to own their own investment, place, home. And today we're going to talk about buying a property, joint mortgage or not. Firstly, I wanted to talk about if you bought a mortgage jointly. There are two different terms when you're talking to your solicitor. A bank will still see you as owning the property jointly if you do a mortgage together, but a solicitor and legally may see it differently. Now, there's the first thing that's called joint tenancy. Now, joint tenancy means that you both own equal rights to the property, but you own the whole property. So you don't own 50-50, you both own 100% and the other one owns 100%. So if for some reason, and I've had a friend who was in this position, their other half goes walkies, they still are liable for the whole 100% of the mortgage. But tenants in common is different. Now, say you go and buy a property with someone and you can put down, say, 75% of the deposit and they're putting down 25% of the deposit, and then when the mortgage is being paid you're paying a little bit more than them, or that's going to happen. What you are going to probably want is to have a bigger cut. In my opinion, that's what I feel you should do. So that's when you'd go for tenants in common, and you'd speak to your solicitor about this, and what you would say is you have a different percentage share. So you've got joint tenants where you both own the 100%, and then you've got tenants in common where you could both own 50%, or one could own 75 and the other one could own 25. Now, the difference is the bank will see it one way. Your solicitor, obviously, the legal ownership will also see it as joint tenants or tenants in common. So you need to be aware of what you're doing. And if you don't say anything, they will just assume and probably put you down as joint tenants. So get this checked out. Now, what is a joint mortgage? I kind of just jumped in with the definition of the two, but basically a joint mortgage is when you purchase it with someone else. Normally you can have up to 4 people on the application, and then you if it's just a normal joint mortgage, not a joint borrower sole proprietor, which there is another video on, if it's a standard joint mortgage, then it will be whoever is on the mortgage will also be on the deed. What I mean by the deed is there's a thing called land registry, and as soon as you purchase a property, i.e. you complete on the purchase and you get those keys, you can move in, they will register you on land registry, and then you can go online and type in land registry, put in your address, and sometimes you have to pay a charge, sometimes you don't, to see who actually owns that property, and there will be your name. If you've purchased a property that someone else used to own and it's not a new build, it will actually have times and dates between you owning it and them owning it, and that kind of stuff. Land registry is also very good for knowing more information about the property. It's one of the checks actually that the solicitor does for you, just to check that the person you're buying from does actually own the property. I mean, they could be living there, but the person who owns it could have passed away and actually in the will someone else owns it. They could be anywhere for some reason. So the person who actually is in the property selling it, you just need to double check that they can legally sell it. The next thing is who can get a joint mortgage. Right, to be honest, it doesn't actually make a big difference. It doesn't have to be like everybody assumes it's got to be man and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend or a relative or whatever. I mean, when I was at university, 4 guys who were really, really good friends, rather than paying rent, decided to buy a property together. So they just got a document written up to say that's what the intention was, and they went ahead, did the mortgage. So they were just friends. I know a lady that she was going through a hard time, and a lady that she didn't know very well, but had a lot of money and kind of felt like she took her under her wing. She they bought the property together when they didn't really know each other very well. So yeah, it doesn't really matter who. There are certain rules when it comes to the deposit and someone is gifting it to you, so they're giving it to you and you do not have to pay it back. It's not a loan and they're not asking for a percentage of the property or anything like that. Then that is called a gifted deposit, and there are certain rules. Certain lenders will only allow it to be a blood relative or step relative as well. But that's the only situation. When you're actually going for a mortgage, it's up to four people, and it can be anyone really. The next question I've been asked before is, what is the difference between a joint mortgage and a standard mortgage? Now, basically, a joint mortgage is jointly between a certain amount of parties, so it could be between four, three, or two. As I said, a standard mortgage is just a normal mortgage. So at the end of the day, to say joint and standard, they are pretty much the same thing. Standard would be like the top type, it's just an everyday mortgage, and then you decide whether you own it in your sole name, it as a limited company, or as a normal joint mortgage. But a standard one would be, just a normal average mortgage, and then it depends what category after that would differ. How much can you borrow when you're doing a joint mortgage? Now, you can borrow more, which is probably a little bit obvious, but it's always good to state, because not everybody is coming here at different levels of education. And as I've always said, you can always pop in the comments questions and I will happily answer them if you're not sure about anything. So yes, borrowing is higher. So how it's worked out is, in the affordability calculator, you'll put in both applicants, or four applicants, or whatever it is, and then depending on the lender, if it's four, they may not take 100% of everybody's income. If it's two, they normally do take 100%, but you have to look at it from different points of view. So for example, I had a client and she was self-employed, but her other half was employed. We had to get a particular mortgage that would allow self-employed and employed. Normally most mortgages are employed, but there are special self-employed mortgages. If you're one of each, then you need to make sure you've got the right lender that will allow both. The deposit that's needed. So basically, once you calculate how much you can afford jointly, and that will take into consideration what your income is, less expenditure, credit commitments, and all that good stuff, and then they'll work it out. And then from there, you'll be able to figure out whether you want to put down a 5% deposit, a 10%. And obviously, if you're doing it jointly, that's a discussion that you both need to have. I keep on saying both, but as I said, there can be 2, 3, or 4 people, but you have to have a discussion, and so you all agree how much deposit is going in. I assume that if it's that many people going on the mortgage, say 4, then you would have more than 5% deposit. But yeah, you need to decide, and again, depending on how much deposit each of you put in, you should have this written down somewhere legally, and that should be one of the deciding factors whether you go for joint tenancy, which is equal liability, whether one walks or one stays, whoever is there is the one responsible for the mortgage. It's not a 50-50 or a 25 if there's 4. It's not 33 if it's 3. It is 100%, so you overlap each other, so you're there to cover for the other one. It does affect your credit score. Once you are financially linked, unless you let them know, they will always assume you're financially linked. So when you run your credit report, it will show that you have a mortgage, and then on the other person's credit report, it will show that they have a mortgage. And then when it comes to the bottom part of the credit report, where it says financial associates, it will link you with them. Again, I once had a client, and even though she was divorced her husband, or ex-husband, I should say, she hadn't told the credit agencies that they were no longer together, and he'd run up massive gambling debts, unfortunately. And the situation was, it was affecting her credit, and we couldn't get her a remortgage, funny enough, on her flat because of this. So she had to actually get a solicitor to note down that they were divorced, they were no longer financially tied, and I think it's called a deed of separation. I need to double, or yeah, I think it was a deed of separation. And because of that legal document, and there's forms on the online that you can get, but I would suggest you speak to a solicitor and get it done properly. And then once you've done that, you can then give this to all the estate agents, all of the credit agencies, to make sure that you are no longer financially connected, because again, it really can affect your credit score. So just to go over it just one last time, a joint mortgage is when 2, 3 or 4 people have a mortgage together, and you can have different types. You can have common tenants, or you can have joint tenants, or you can have tenants in common, and those are obviously explained, and I've explained them in the description. So I hope that gave you enough information on how it all works, why it's important to have this conversation up front. As I said at the beginning, when I bought my first property, I was single, so it wasn't an issue. When I went to buy my second property, me and my other half weren't living together, so I decided to buy in my own name, which he was more than happy with. But then later on, once we got married and we were buying our house, I kept my flats in my name, but I bought the house with him. And I still like now having the independence of having my own flats, but everybody is different. I know one lady, she bought her first property in her own name. When she met her husband, they went on to buy a property together, but she actually changed over the property that she'd bought in her own name to be in both their joint names. So everybody has their own reasons for doing what they're doing. Just make sure you do the research and be 100% sure what you feel comfortable doing. So thank you very much for your time. It was really, really good to talk to you. It'd be lovely if you could subscribe to the channel and share the link, and I really appreciate all your support.